Hello, my friends, and welcome to our January 2022 book club. We're so excited to get into this book, a really popular book. We've had lots of comments along the way. My name is Jo Bell, and I'm going to be your host for tonight. Let me do a little tiny bit of housekeeping because we have some wonderful new folks here tonight. So I'm excited to welcome you. And what we try to do is to welcome the folks who are here live. And we know a lot of folks actually go into our YouTube channel or onto our Facebook page and grab the recordings. So we'd love it if you're here tonight live that you enable your video. We love seeing folks' faces, kind of like you're sitting in a gorgeous living room, maybe over at the big farmhouse in front of that big fireplace you all saw us share this weekend. That way, also, if you ensure that you're in gallery view instead of speaker view, which simply means that you can see everybody. And when a person is speaking, they light up a little bit rather than just seeing one person at a time. We also love it if you open your chat box and type in your name and maybe your first and last name and your email address. Make sure we have you in our database. We do not spam you, but we do send out about one email a week. And for folks who missed a week, at the bottom there's a nice link right to our YouTube channel. You'd be surprised how many things are named Sanctuary in YouTube. So it's kind of hard to find us. That link will send you right to our channel, and you can see all 78 of our recorded presentations, and you can cruise some amazing conversations in there. There you go. Also, we love staying in contact with you. The way we do that, if you'd like to also, this has become a favorite tool that we use. If you put your cell phone number in the chat, or if you'd like to keep it private, you can private message it to Barb in the chat. Every Tuesday, our database sends you a little reminder that says, hey, Carol, it's Tuesday, book club tonight, or sexuality and spirituality tonight, or whatever. So, during the days of COVID, I think it's nice to be reminded that it's indeed Tuesday. So we'll do that if you put your cell phone number in the link. Also, as I said, we post all of our recordings both on our YouTube channel, but it's really easy to also go over to our Facebook page and grab a recording there. It's just Sanctuary in the Woods. Our email, if you ever want to get a hold of us, is also quite easy. Talk to us at sanctuaryinthewoods.com. So I don't know if you made it, but oh my goodness, on Sunday, I think we should unmute and applaud ourselves. We had the most fun, informative, photogenic annual meeting in the history of Sanctuary this last weekend. That we had over 40 guests, Barb, right? Came to hear what we updated people on in 2021. Yes. We call them the remarkable progress and strides we made over a year of COVID, and the world was on lockdown, and that didn't stop us any doggone it. Also, we let folks know what we were looking forward to in 2022. So if you haven't seen it and you're interested in what we're doing here at Sanctuary, those recordings are again available on our YouTube channel, and also they're posted up on our Facebook page. And finally, many of you have been a part of our What Hath COVID Wrought series that Kristen has been facilitating for us. Thank you, Kristen. Yeah. You've been doing a phenomenal job, Kristen. And a couple of weeks ago, we talked about how has COVID, I would say, changed, but really we talked about the blessings and the challenges in our personal lives. The next week, we talk about the same thing, but in our professional lives. And next week, February 1st, we had planned to end the series with how has COVID impacted our spiritual lives. But there's been so much great attention. We may roll a couple more of these out. Glenda, I think it might have been you that talked about young people, right? Like the world they're moving into, not only professionally, but also just how to be in the world, to be in relationship, to date. Kristen, you mentioned that. Kevin, the other night, mentioned that. It's just a very changed world. And so we've got a little bit of room in our February and March calendar. We'll let you know next week on what we've decided on doing. So that's kind of a little what's coming. And oh my goodness. Carolyn Rose and Jennifer, we have read this many books. We are a book reading group of people. And last month was Hillary Rodham Clinton and Louise Penny. So tonight is the Personal Librarian. This is where I hush. And if you have great ideas about books along the way tonight, go ahead and put those in the chat room and I'll collect those. And what we do is at the end of the evening, we vote on what the book is for next month. So Cheryl, my love, they are all yours.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
All right. Now, most of you, I mean, I love that Jennifer, you came and didn't even read the book. I love it, you know, so hopefully this will be an interesting conversation for you and you'll be encouraged to read the book. So anyway, I think most of you got an email or some kind of text or something that said, what we're going to do tonight is a little bit different. Normally I just ask questions, but tonight what I'm going to do is we're going to ask you to look at the discussion questions that are in the back of the book and to pick out one or two that you really want to talk about and just put the number of that question in the chat. And that's what we'll talk about. Do you guys have the book available to look at them or have you figured that out already? 14 to vote, 10 and 11. 8. We're gonna get every freaking question, you know.
You're gonna get every question in the book.
have not listening. Carolyn Rose, do you have the book with you? Do you have the ability to look at the questions?
Our copy does not have the list of questions in the book, but are they? I looked online, and there are some questions like 14. Discussion questions on the internet. I can go and print those out. So
yeah. Or you don't really have to so much because we'll say them. You can print them out if you want to, but we'll
okay.
you know talk
Right,
about them as we go through them. But
Cheryl,
if you wanted to find one and vote, you could. But
Cheryl, if you go slow enough and you read the question, I can post it. If you go slow enough when you decide, I can write the question in the chat room. Here comes Jan.
They're kind of long questions, Joby.
yeah,
they're really long questions.
I mean, I'm sure you're a good typist.
We'll read them and people will get them. Yeah, we'll read them and it'll be fine because we'll just take one part of each question. There's like 3 questions in each question, right?
right.
I'm gonna go mute until you need me again. I just was an idea. I'm just gonna go mute myself.
I'll just turn it. I'll just turn the.
Hi, Jane Ann.
Hi, Jane Ann. All right, Jane Ann, if you want to vote for a question, go ahead and put one in there. I think we're going to start with number 8 right now. We'll just kind of go in the order that they're in, huh? Does that sound okay?
I don't have them in front of me because I had to return the book to the library. So whatever you do is fine.
I sent them to you in an email, but that's okay. All right.
Okay. Let me see.
So number 8 is, how would you describe the attraction between Belle and Bernard Berenson? Who wrote this question? Kristen, this is the question
I didn't write it. That's a lot of credit.
Yeah. What were the attributes that drew them together and ultimately forced them apart? Then how did you feel about their relationship and Belle's ability to have a partner and family of her own? So let's start with the first part. How would you describe the attraction between Belle and Bernard Berenson?
Lusty.
Say lusty?
Lusty. Ooh, yeah.
That's what I thought. Sexual. Like a chemical attraction.
Was he that much
know.
older than she was?
Yeah. This relationship fascinated me.
I think she allowed herself to feel an attraction for this man because he was basically safe. He was married. He came and went, moved around the globe. Yeah, she had a lot of barriers up. And, you know, for one thing, she was supporting her family and she knew that was going to go on and on and on. So she didn't want to fall for a traditional, she would never allow herself, I think, to fall for a traditional romance where, you know, she would marry and the family would go whatever way they went. She knew that it was her job. She had the ability to support them. And so I think he became, you know, very attractive to her because there was that physical attraction, which could have for several people, but it was also the situational attraction. She could get involved with him and not see, immediate tie down right away.
I'm with Cynthia 100%. I feel like her initial attraction to him was almost as like an idol and unreachable, right? He was the author of this book that her father had presented her with. He was a married man. Is rumored that he, may have been Jewish, as the story unfolds, that comes out. So he had secrets of his own to keep. And in that, he was both like dangerous, but I think she initially found him unattainable. And so a really safe flirtation. And I loved the way it unfolded when she's like, wait, this door is open. And then I think she saw that it was open because she felt that so many other doors were closed to her for all the reasons Cynthia said. She had to take care of her family. She had to continue to pass. She didn't think she could settle down and have babies because she'd get caught out in her passing. And it was interesting then after she did get her heart broken, I think she found a way to continue to use him for what she needed. And she tried to convince herself that she was the one using him, and yet she continued to be hurt by him constantly. Like, I don't think she was ever honest with herself about just how much she could be, hurt by him.
I think, Kristen,
And did so many things to try to fill that gap.
The other thing that came to my mind as both of you were sharing this was her youth. At the beginning of the relationship, she really had no basis for evaluating the situation. And she was certainly smitten from a professional standpoint. And then they got together and they had a common language that they could share professionally. So all of the pieces started to really come together to the point where infatuation just swept her away.
I was going to say, I think she was very, very naive in the beginning. And just as Glenda had said, she was infatuated with Bernard. And I think part of that, because she was really lonely inside. She had really nobody to share her life with, and also her knowledge about art and everything. And naive, I think also, if someone is married and they want to have a relationship with you, even though it's quote unquote an open marriage, there's going to be tons of problems with that. That's like a stick of dynamite, I think. But I do think she was naive, and he betrayed her later on, several times. Yeah. Anyway.
I think, but he was a lot older, I think, than she was, right, you guys?
Yeah, a couple decades.
And it seemed like she got pregnant like within a minute.
I think they were, I had to go back and double check because I think they were in Italy for like a month. So then it made more sense when I went back and checked the timeline, because I was with you. I'm like, okay, I know they tell you in high school it could happen the first time, but
that was fast.
Well, the thing that I felt was, in the last part of the question is, how do you feel about their relationship and Belle's ability to have a partner and family of her own? Because she went down that path, and once she got pregnant, she was like, wow, maybe I could have a family. Maybe I could. She really wrestled with that. And it was like, I don't know. I think, when you get pregnant, sometimes you start thinking about that aspect of your life rather than just as her professional life, and of course it caused all kinds of tension for her, yes?
Yeah. I think
I was just going to say, that was really, really sad when she told Bernard that she was expecting, and his reply to her, oh, we can't have that has to be, no. It was just heartbreaking to read that.
Yeah.
To what you said about, like, how do you expect there not to be some downside of getting involved with a married man? As I was reading, I was like, he's not going to be happy about this, right? Like, he needed her in some aching way to like possess her and own her. But the image of the relationship with, you know, the partnership you have. In some ways, he was more faithful to Mary in what he shared with her in his life than he ever was to you know, probably any of his mistresses, but certainly to her, to Belle. But yeah, that was the what would I give up? I'd have to give this up. I'd have to give this up. But what if I did this? And what if I did that? And would that be worth it? You know, I think it kind of has echoes of, you know, I think any mother and Belle's own mother, you know, what did she give up to have the family passing as white? And so now here's Belle like, well, maybe I could be a mother. What would I have to give up? And would that all be worth it? And then without any support, those, you know, that one chapter,
and what would the child look like?
Yeah, that one chapter goes by kind of dizzy, where all of a sudden somebody else is swooped in to help walk her through this process, and like before you know, it's done and over with, and then it's done. And like everything you thought, what if, which are the kinds of decisions that you should take your time making, and then it's just done, right?
There's a whole profile of Bernard at the end of the book that put so much in context for me, because to me, he was plotting against all of these women, and this so-called wife of his was in the conspiracy with him. She was engaging all of these women that could give him financial leverage in his career. And that's why sweet little Mary at the end of the book tried to coax her into going back with him, because wanted the connect, and he wanted to flush on file his own. He dropped them like flies when they were no.
I had not thought about the financial aspect of Bernard's attraction to Belle. I thank you, Glenda. That's a real revelation there.
Yeah,
I hadn't thought about that either. Yeah.
Weird, because it's so obvious that Belle uses flirtation to get ahead. Why wouldn't he be doing the same thing? Yeah. Is that, was that, Glenn, was that like in the historical notes you saw that too? You said
it was in the sorry, Ken.
It didn't show up until very late in the book, of course, with that last episode. But then in the historical notes, you know, the author said, we found evidence of this, that there is historical evidence that he was using her to get information that he would then pass on to other people for financial gain for himself. And so that was there all the time, but it really showed up right at the end of the book.
When those two men came into her office to talk to her about purchasing, and then they flipped the purpose of the meeting around to trying to get her working for them instead of for Morgan. And then it was so clear.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting that her attraction to both of the men that she was attracted to in her life, both JP Morgan and to Bernard, they were both very much, she was attracted to them a lot because of their similarities in their art and what they cared about, right? So it was that draw to the art that really seemed like that was her attraction to them. You know, it was almost like I don't know, I just found that very interesting that was her attraction, right?
And the absence of
he had some very serious father. She had some very serious father issues and her father, remember, introduced her to art. And so both the men she was attracted to in her life were older men who knew a lot about this specific field of art that her father had introduced her to. And so I kept seeing, you know, her need for daddy in all of these, in both of these relationships.
Me too.
Oh, wow. I hadn't thought of that, Ken. That's cool. Yeah. All right. Well, let's go on to, Ken, you had a couple, number 10 and number 11. Let's look at those. Number 10. How familiar were you with passing before reading this novel? Has your understanding of the reasons and sacrifices behind it altered after reading about Belle's life? Let's take the first question and just raise your hands. How familiar were you all with passing? Was everybody kind of familiar with it?
Like,
No?
I
Yes,
grew up in
but-
Mississippi in the 1940s and 50s and 60s, and passing was an agenda that was always present, always. People would look at dark-skinned people and there would be rumors about them. There was a family that lived in my little town. They had 2 children, a girl named Marilyn in my class and a boy named Buddy in my younger brother's class, and they were dark-skinned, and it was a constant kind of inference, you know, that these weren't really white people. It's true that in the South, at least during my childhood, this was a scenario against which everybody was always judged, you know, was the tone of your skin. And I can remember as a child, you know, seeing, particularly at Black churches, the paper bag test, the grocery store bag test, where they would take a grocery store bag and nail it up by the front door. And if you were darker than that bag, you could not enter. And that was African American were discriminating
Black
against the
churches, so you
very
were
Black
too Black?
African American people.
So you're like too Black for a lighter Black society.
Well,
Wow.
when I read this, I immediately thought, well, many of us in this group will have experience because I, like Ken, grew up in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and coming out at 19 or 20, I mean, I practiced passing for at least 15 years. You know what I mean? I went into groups and I tried to pass her straight.
Yep.
And I would always had one foot in one situation and one in another. And I just understood. I mean, and I had friends of, you know, I understood the racial situation too, but I'm just saying passing just hit me right. Oh yeah, I remember those years of trying to constantly pass. In fact, I have a picture of George Murphy and myself that's sitting in front of me here. We went to prom in Detroit. George was a high school counselor and I was teaching and at the University of Wayne State. And, you know, I went with George. We were both passing. He had to have a date for that high school prom. And, you know, we had fun, but I mean, we were passing.
Yeah,
I think
I was going to say Roberta certainly went through that as well, Cynthia. You know, she was quite a bit older than me, so she came through a whole different era of acceptance, and there was none, of course, but it affected her particularly in with her children. She fooled them their entire life until I came along, and so passing was just in her makeup. In fact, she almost did marry a gay man in order to pass as straight. Of course, it affected her career and everything. So, and one other thing.
Says I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, one other thing. I was an American history teacher for eighth grade, and there was not one word about it in any of our teaching material. And so, and I had never heard of it. Of course, I grew up in Austin, which was a little different than deep Mississippi or something, but we did have a lot of, I mean, it was inferred, let's put it that way, most of the time, and certainly in our neighborhood and so forth. But I had never heard of it. And just before we started reading this book, just before I don't remember who suggested this book, but I happened to see a movie and I found out what it was. And so when I started reading this book, I had some knowledge of it just from that movie. But until then, you know, at 42, I wish I was 42, 72 years old, I had never heard of it.
Well,
that's it.
I thought it was. Have you guys ever? One of the books I read. Has everybody ever heard of that book, Black Like Me? It was written in 1961.
Yeah,
it was about a guy who colored his skin dark and passed and went around for 6 weeks. Yeah, that was the first exposure I had to, you know, going the other way, and it talked about and you know, people passing in that book. And that was where I was mostly exposed to it from the beginning. So that was, when I read that book, maybe in high school or college, or no, it was a little older than that. I was maybe right when I was in the Air Force. So maybe, I don't know, early 70s or something like that. What was, you know, that time frame. So 20.
I mean, I feel like I was oblivious to even awareness of different races or colors or anything like that until we came back from Spain and we moved to Prattville, Alabama. So I never heard of passing. I never heard of, you know, half the stuff. And then when we moved here, there's even my Hispanic friends tell me that they judge each other by how dark they are. Like one of my girlfriends is really light skinned, and she said her whole family wanted to disown her because she was marrying a dark skinned Mexican guy. I'm today's day and age, I'm like shocked that that stuff still goes on, you know? And that people are ignorant enough to think
At one
way.
point, Bell says, if you lead two lives, you always have to be looking at the world with two separate sets of eyes. And that's that dualistic, schizophrenic kind of reality for anybody who is passing. And then remember that speech in chapter 28 when Bell's mother talks to her about when you are passing, and Cynthia, this is certainly true about, you know, those of us who were trying to pass, you know, as straight. Her mother talks to her, you know, and it's about how hard it is to be a part of the dominant, to pretend to be a part of the dominant culture, which is oppressing the culture that your heart actually lives in. You know, it is a horizontal violence. It's like pretending to be straight and laughing at gay jokes.
There's in the book that one's early on and one's later, and I have to think that she wrote this on purpose. That the author put these two scenes in the book purposely, because she has two interactions with waiters, and one is at like one of the first parties she's at, and she's very much in her own head, afraid she's going to get caught out as a fraud, and she accidentally locks eyes with she says a colored man, right, a black waiter, and then she, or no, sorry, it's a woman. The first time was a woman waiter, and then she has this realization that the black woman sees her, but kind of gives her like a "you go girl," you know, like a "wow, you're, you know, I'm proud of you for doing this," and she wasn't expecting that. And then later in the book, when she's drunk and in her own downward spiral, and she gets approached by the black waiter, and she purposely tries to make eye contact, and she's like, "Thanks for your service," and she's like, "He's gonna see me and he's gonna know me and we're gonna bond," and that black man is like threatened by her, doesn't seem to see her as colored, sees her as a white woman that she's trying to pass as, and like runs away as if he's the one in danger. And like like, to me, that was just to your point, like the schizophrenic world that she must have lived in the moment she was afraid of being seen, she was seen and it turned out okay. And the moment she wanted to be seen, he didn't see her, and in fact, she scared him. Like how crazy that must just be on your mind.
I think it's really lucky that she loved what she did to make money to support her family. Otherwise, it seems like she would have felt totally used, you know? Pushed into passing.
Well, but she was kind of used by her mother, though.
Definitely, but I think she loved that art so much that it didn't bother her. I think she realized it.
Well, I was thinking about it today, and you know, one thing, I mean, I think generally about the power dynamics between male and female a lot, and it seems like males they have a much easier time being what we would consider ruthless, you know, just figuring out, you know, either honestly or through skullduggery how to get what you want. And she developed a kind of a ruthlessness. you know, to buy the art. And maybe that was part of how she her own power in ways that she couldn't societally. But in terms of passing, what really struck me was that, you know, for those of us, you know, those of us who had to pass for whatever reason, but we eventually were able to kind of come out and say, fuck it, I'm out, I'm proud, whatever. She had to go to the grave with that secret, because then her achievements would have been upended, her family would have been flipped into turmoil. And so I kind of felt bad for her dad, you know, that his whole life was about civil rights activism, but he could not be in a family that was passing his way and be an activist for civil rights at the same time. I mean, what a quandary that was.
Yeah.
On page 59, Bell says that in order to assimilate, you have to hide your differences in plain sight. In order to pass, you have to hide your differences in plain sight. And many of us know what that means. It means you have to tell lies.
Right.
It means you have to hurt people. And so it forces you into a kind of, I think you used the word ruthlessness, dishonesty, which does damage to our souls in irreparable ways. And that's the only way to survive. It is a matter of survival, you know, when you reach that point, you know, and it's a devastating kind of guilt producing thing that we have to eventually forgive ourselves for, and realize that that was not our choice. We did not choose to live like that. We had to live like that, sometimes just to preserve relationships and sometimes to save our own lives.
You know, and I think that's true so much, but thinking that women, Edie, I was saying this back to what you said about not being ruthless enough to get what they want. Women, Southern women, were taught to be deceptive and to trick their husbands into doing what they wanted to get what they wanted, because they couldn't ever go out for it openly, you know?
I miss
so
those.
I don't think women have a hard time. Maybe. Go ahead.
No, sorry. Go ahead and finish your thought.
I really was rattling on.
Yeah,
sorry.
no, I was gonna say it intrigued me. I found the story interesting that she had this huge secret about part of her identity, and yet she was openly, obviously, a woman at a time also when women were fighting for rights. And so she was on the fringe of the equal rights, but while here's her father, who she can't really acknowledge to be found out as that minority, but then she's openly in this circle of friends who are fighting for the rights of this other minority. And so I could relate to her sometimes in the book, and some other things that haven't changed, and just the equality of women. And there was like a passage really early on where she talks about like having to be bold. And she's like, well, I have to wear this bold dress, and I have to wave the scarf, because it's not like I can, like, times I've gone into a business conference and I smoke a cigar and I drink bourbon when I go to networking events. I am the bold woman who puts myself into the pack of guys, and I go in with a dress that's fitted and some cleavage showing. And then I'm like, yeah, give me my bourbon, not too much ice. Yeah, I'll take a cigar. Why not? Let's go. And I am like, and they're all like, well, shit, a woman can do this. And I've made more professional connections. I've had more doors open to me by being brassy and bold than I could ever have gotten by being feminine. And it was just, yeah, I was like, shit, I took a page out of her book on that one.
Yeah, I was like oblivious in my career.
No, I was never I learned, I mean, I was also very young in a position of too much responsibility, but people were I learned very young how to use that to my advantage. Yeah. Yeah. How to flirt,
I
just
used
a
it.
little. And then when in the conversation to change it to the business topic that I intended to get to all along, but to start the conversation and flirtation, because they weren't going to start talking to me about business. But once I flirted a little and they were there and they were engaged, then change the topic and then let them respect me for what I have to
So
say
Kristen,
after I reeled them in with a smile.
were you passing during that?
I mean, I
In a
guess
way.
it's just, I mean, I wasn't really gonna go home with any of them. So if I guess, right? I don't know. Asking for a ditz, I don't know. But yeah, no, in some ways, I don't know, right? I don't know if it's the same as passing, but it is. But it's right. I loved this. I loved everything about this book because there was like the race and then the the one man, oh my God, no, he might be a Jew. And then you got the women in the Boston marriages. And then this whole thing of women's equality being fought out there in the open.
So what, a Boston marriage is a three-way?
No,
I had to Google it.
Menage.
It's usually just, it was a lesbian relationship, but they called it a Boston marriage. That was just a term that they used for two women living together without being married.
Okay.
According to Wikipedia, I made me giggle because Wikipedia said that it was, often two women, academic women who didn't want to rely on men would choose to live together so they didn't have to rely on men. And that sometimes it was a lesbian relationship. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure it was always.
Yeah.
I think
Have any of
Wikipedia is
you
tiptoeing around that one.
have any of you Googled Belle and
Yes,
do
I
that?
did.
Yeah,
Yes.
there's just amazing pictures. In
Oh.
fact, all of the historical people in this book, I think I've Googled all of them because I just want to see what they really looked like.
Right, I did too.
Yeah, but those fashion pictures of Belle are just really amazing. She talks quite a bit, in the book about being photographed, and what she would wear and how she would pose herself and all of that. And when you Google her, you'll find hundreds of pictures of her, and you'll recognize that the authors had looked at those exact same pictures when they were writing those passages about her.
And there's another book about her that isn't it more non-fictional? I can't remember
There's
the
a
name.
biography about her. Yeah, I
There's a
saw that too.
biography.
There's a biography about her. Yeah.
If I may, I'd just like to go back to what Ken said a few minutes ago with regards to the element of guilt and how many times throughout the book she responded to the guilt and assumed so many things that the other person was thinking or seeing or feeling that they weren't, but the guilt was so deeply embedded in her that it was almost first position in every conflict that she sensed. And I agree. I've felt the same myself before I came out. And you just jump to conclusions the way that your brain turns these things into threatening situations because you are not being open and honest with whoever it is that you're encountering. So Ken, thank you for that. I think the guilt thing was a huge piece of the whole story.
Yeah.
There's a wonderful series. I think, has anybody seen this?
Well, and
it's called Unauthorized Living. It's filmed in Spain. And there's a gay actor in it, and he is outed. And when he is outed, the company that his agent, the company that represent him, everybody just jumps all over him and says, "You lied to us. You lied to us. You don't deserve our attention anymore. You lied to us." And he takes all of this guilt onto himself, and just becomes almost suicidal until he's able to rise up and say, "Wait a minute, I didn't ask for this. If you would accept me for who I really am, I would never have had to lie to you." And so one of the ways of getting that guilt out is realizing you didn't choose it, and I wouldn't have chose it if I had had a choice at the time.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ken, because I had a hard time. I spent my entire career passing, and I still have a lot of guilt about that. But so thank you for an opportunity for forgiveness for my, for feeling like I had to do that. Now I'm letting down my hair, so to speak, and I'm in the retirement years, and but
good, good for you.
So I have a question with regards to that. Did anybody feel at the end that she would become her authentic in public, or did everybody feel she'd go to her grave not?
Also, she'd go to her grave.
I had a moment where I thought she was going to, and
Me
then
too.
when she met with her father, and her father told her, I hope there's a time in the world where that would be safe. I wish it was safe, but it's not. Don't do it.
Yeah.
And then when she further decided to really make it her mission to bring the library public, I realized, like, with her dad's parting words, she could not have accomplished that goal. Like, she would have undone what she built, like the legacy she built.
So does anybody know the moment in time when the public learned that she was a Black woman?
No.
Did
Do
they?
you?
We know now, but how did we get to know?
Yeah, that's gotta, okay, hold on. It's gotta be in Google.
I know. See who can get it
It's gonna
first.
Google it. But it seemed to me like the same thing, Kristen. Her dad gave her permission to continue down that life. And it was like, it was about him. Like you said, Ken, she was so attached to him and so, about her dad that it had to be him that gave her that permission, that helped her not have to feel guilty about it. Okay, I'm moving on with my life. And now my family, my baby is this library. This is my baby. This is who I'm all about. This is, and then she was able to move on with it. It's what it seemed like to me.
Yep, I agree.
Was everybody
Yeah,
else
what do you
as
think?
impressed with the research these authors did?
Amazing.
As a
wow.
writer, I'm trying to write a book right now about a period in history, and I'm trying to do a lot of research. I cannot imagine the amount of research that had to be done to write this book about art, the art and world and all of that.
Absolutely. I mean, there's none of these questions even address the art or the books or the outfits that they wore and stuff. None of that's in any of these questions. But wasn't it amazing?
Really
I mean,
was.
I just I mean,
I never could figure out
all those books.
why she wasn't outed because of her father. He was pretty well known, apparently, and if anybody knew what he was doing and knew he was her father, there would have been questions, but somehow that never connected. I don't know why.
He
They
spelled his
moved
last name differently.
and changed their
He
name.
spelled his last
Oh,
name
I know
And
she
she
changed her
moved to a
name,
different
but,
part, the world wasn't so small as it is now.
Yeah. Cynthia, go ahead. Did you have a thought about?
Sorry.
When you first started, I think we should look at question number 1, because sort of like this, setting the whole family scene. There are parts of that the whole family scene and everything that I felt were actually quite traditional, because look at how many of her sisters went into the teaching profession, and white or Black, that it's always been seen as a way from the working class to get to the middle class at least. And they all, went to school, and 2 of them didn't teach, I guess, at the end there, but they all went into those kind of careers. And I just think the formation of the family was a little more traditional than I first thought. I mean, she was untraditional in her pursuits, but the rest of them were, and the son, of course, went to special schools, and they insisted that he be an engineer. So
Yeah.
Well, obviously the family
But
was
Janice-
highly educated. You know, that was unusual for a Black family, certainly. And, but they had the advantage, I guess, of being so light-skinned that they could get highly educated. And so that was part of the passing. It wasn't just their skin. It was their confidence, the superior education, the brilliance of their minds. Even her sisters, teachers,
But was it not also a coincidence of timing? Because I don't know the history, of course, because I'm not in the US, but there was so much reference to the Reconstruction period that
Right.
enabled the Black community to rapidly move ahead in their position, even though ultimately it was undone again. But I think it was the coincidence of timing that enabled that family to move that far, that fast in time.
Yeah.
And then it went away.
Had anybody ever heard of that? Was anybody knew about that Reconstruction time? I mean, I was like blown away that had actually happened, and he was able to be a Harvard, go to Harvard and be a professor. And I was like, oh my God, and then all of a sudden all that got taken away. Go ahead.
Remember during Black History Month last year when we had the guests who were telling us about, remember the Oklahoma town that was literally bombed because Black people had were rising to a place socially and economically that was beginning to approach equality. And so literally towns were burned, families were destroyed, hundreds of people were killed. Anytime a Black person would begin to rise, and it came, Reconstruction really did make that possible in the South. There was a Black senator from the state of Mississippi in the 1860s. There hadn't been one since, but there was one in the 1860s.
Yeah, it's interesting to me, right? And there's all those references in this book to, and I was like checking my timelines to think that like her father was a contemporary of Frederick Douglass and Du Bois, and like I'm like, oh well, I know who those people are, heard of them, but I don't think that the line through history was connected, that there was initially okay, Black people are free and freedom means equal rights, and then a rebelling of white supremacy that squashed them back down again, right? So that the Greener family was higher ranking in Washington, DC. And I think there's even a reference to like, well, you can't go back there because that's technically the North, but it's a little too far south. And I think it's going to turn into a bad neighborhood.
That violent oppression is happening again right now at this moment in history. Voter suppression, just all of it.
Yeah.
Very far back.
It bothers me that people, this is off the subject of the book, sorry, it's that they fight so much about not having Black history taught, because seriously, I didn't know any of that. I didn't know there was such a thing called Jim Crow laws. I didn't know that Reconstruction time or resurrection, whatever it was. I didn't know that about that Oklahoma town. I mean, to be honest, when that lady got fired from NBC because she didn't know blackface was bad, I was right with her. I was oblivious to all that. I mean, we as Air Force brats, our parents weren't allowed to talk about it or anything. And we went to school with kids that, to me, we were all the same, we were Americans.
That is true. And in our what we grew up with, Kelly, it's true, because I know when we were in Spain, it was the same thing. And it never occurred to me when the first guy I dated and he was coming over to pick me up at the house was Black. It never occurred to me to tell my parents he was Black. It never occurred to me, and they grew up in Texas. And so, and they acted very fine. They just kind of were poker faced when I brought him over and, we started dating and stuff. But later they told me later, they said, "Oh my God, Cheryl, do you know what that did? Oh my God, we were so freaking out, you know?" And but they didn't tell me that till years later.
Guess who's
You
coming
didn't
to
even think
dinner?
twice
But-
about it being an issue.
Yeah, guess who's coming to dinner? Exactly. Yeah.
I think
So,
it's the same,
yeah, we
thing, like
grew up
if you
that way.
don't know your history, you don't understand why today's events bother people. And I think I hear the same, you hear the same echoes when they're like,
Yes.
well, why do you have to have gay pride? I hear about people, some of you even who are like, if you'd been open about your personal love life and relationship status, that your job would have been at risk, or your other relationships and people you loved and how they would look at you and your social standing. And like, that's a real fear not very long ago.
And it's still,
And so it's worth celebrating that it's, that it's not that way in a lot
I
of
would
places.
think
I
And it
lost my
still
job.
is that
I
way.
lost my job. because
Did?
I did. Oh, yes. Absolutely. Right here
Wow.
in Georgetown, Texas. Uh-huh.
I had a boss
And
who
not
was
because
gay.
I was gay, because they thought I might be gay. That's
Wow.
why.
Is that when you were a teacher, Janice? As a teacher?
Yes. Yeah.
You were gonna ruin those kids with your.
This was in 1990.
Wow.
I was
Sorry
sitting in
about
a
that.
meeting.
I think Joby's giving us a
Well,
time
you
check in the
guys-
chat.
We haven't hardly got into any of the questions, but I think we've kind of covered the things that were in the questions. It seems to
Oh,
me,
yeah.
I was looking at them and I said, oh, we kind
Yeah.
of covered that stuff. But in any case, we are at the top of the hour and we need to vote for the next book.
Okay.
And Joby's telling me this, so, I'm
Well,
trying
you
to tell
have-
us we have to stop.
You have 8 books
So,
suggested, Cheryl. That's without Darcel's and yours. So
You have a list again, Joby?
I do.
okay.
And I'm actually gonna quickly, I want you to keep track of these, okay? Let's see if I'm doing this right. No.
So thank you for that discussion, you guys.
Yeah, who chose that
Very
book?
good.
Awesome
Thank
suggestion.
you.
Love that.
That was, well,
Thank
this is
you
my
for
first time and I'll be
Oh,
back.
great. Hey, it was your first book club?
Yes.
Yay, Ken,
Super
yay.
first book club.
Yay.
Great, 4 people on new tonight. So Ken and Carolyn Rose and Jennifer. So thank you all for coming. And what we do here at the end is Cheryl turns over the math to me, which I'm not sure how that ever happened, but it's what we do. And here I'm going to give you kind of a quick read through, quick, of the books that you all posted in the chat. Okay. So Codebreaker, and what I did is I did the same thing. I put them all up on Amazon so we'd kind of be able to take a look at them together. Codebreaker, obviously really high ratings for 8,015. And this is a book about, who's this thing? Who put this out there? Hold on. Let me go to the chat again.
I did.
Glenda, you want to speak, Glenda, to the book while
I
people
did.
read about it really quickly?
Put this one up here.
I did. It's Glenda.
Okay.
Glenda, yeah.
Speak to it.
I don't know that I can do it justice, so we just keep going with the way
Is
it's
it
going.
a novel or
No,
nonfiction or?
It's very timely. It's very informative. And it's revealing as you go through it.
Classified there as history.
Yeah,
It's
but
history.
it's fiction, right?
It
Historical
is
fiction?
probably along the historical fiction
What's the
line.
title again? Scroll up.
It's called The Codebreaker.
Similar.
It says best history under editor's pick. Best
Yeah, and
history,
it's
so.
also a best book of 2021 by Bloomberg, by Time, and by the Washington Post. So I think it's interesting around coding.
I don't know if y'all have ever done this, but with with 8 books, is it possible to give us the titles of the books and then let us go to Google and look at them and then vote tomorrow or the
Ken.
next day?
We're impulse readers.
First timers.
Kristen, that was hilarious.
First timers good.
We have
Sorry.
to vote
We don't
tonight.
actually do this process the same way twice in a row ever.
No, and Kim, this is not pretty. This is kind of like Christmas morning. It's a little bit messy. There's shit everywhere. And at the end, we come up with a book. So The Eternal is another one. Lisa, you put this one up.
I did.
We don't even have Lisa here. Eternal by Dell, you put this one up. What?
Bud.
Bud.
It was very informative. I didn't know anything about Italy during the war, you know, how Mussolini came to power. And that's good. The love story is kind of Hallmark schmaltzy between the kids, but it's basically about the Jewish population in Italy being discriminated against and how they survive that.
Okay, that's Eternal.
Wow.
The love story.
All right,
not
next
so much,
book.
but
What was the name of the first one?
Oh, Kelly, dear God.
Codebreaker.
Kelly, the Codebreaker, and then Eternal. And this one is called The Man on the Mountaintop. A little bit older. Again, these all get great ratings, but only 32 people rated this book when thousands rated the others. Janice, you put this one up here, right? You want to speak to that?
Yeah, it's a spiritual book. It is about this, the man that lives on the mountaintop is like a pope. I mean, he's not the Pope, but people go to see him like Catholics go to the Pope, and he's the most sought out thing in life was to actually have an audience with this man. And this man gives his life that they don't understand because it's not at all spiritual. I mean, it doesn't sound like anything you'd ever get from the Pope, but actually it winds up getting interpreted in the way it was meant to be interpreted.
All right.
It's
Good.
really interesting.
All right. Man on the Mountaintop. The next one, a little bit different. Bossy
One
Pants.
more.
By Tina Fey.
Next.
Bossy Pants. So this would be a little bit different. This one, Carolyn Rose put this one up. Looks
This would be
actually, Carol.
Okay.
Yeah, Carol put that up, and it's a side splitting. If you choose this one, I would definitely get the audio version because she narrates it. But it's her rise in the comedy profession. It's hilarious. It's a very light read, so it might be a month where you want a lighter read. But it's hilarious. Side splitting.
And it talks about women in comedy, which comedy, I don't know, it wasn't long ago that women were not appreciated in comedy.
Yep. And Tina Fey is also
that's kind of cool.
Brilliant. Yep, brilliant. This one was When Life Gives You Pears.
Yeah, that's me. This is from Jeannie Gaffigan, and she's Jim Gaffigan's wife. She's a comedy writer. She's incredible. She had a really bad health scare. She had a pear-shaped tumor in her head, and she had that worked on. And that in the book, she talks about how her faith helped her to heal again. She writes about these really serious things, but she is such a good comedy writer that she can, put some comedy in it. So anyway, I if you guys like it, it is a good book. Very good.
Yeah, thank you. And that was a New York Times bestseller. And then, this one looks like The Pale-Faced Lie. I was trying to get, there you go. Hold on, sorry, The Pale-Faced Lie. This one is a true story. Men's Inspirational Spirituality. Bud, you put this one back up, right?
Yeah, my ex-girlfriend from high school recommends it highly. So I don't know anything about it.
Ex-con forces his son to commit crimes in this unforgettable memoir about family and survival. Growing up on the Navajo Indian Reservation, David Crow and their 3 siblings idolized their dad, a self-taught Cherokee. Then they learned the other side, the whole ex-con side. So maybe this is very different from the other 2 that we just talked about. A Pale-Faced Lie, The Pale-Faced Lie. Again, very good ratings, #1 bestseller.
I actually read it. Oh, I was gonna say, I just finished reading it and it's very, very good.
Okay.
And that was Cynthia? I can't, my internet is very bad, Cheryl.
I didn't say anything.
No, that was Carolyn Rose said that.
Okay. Everybody is frozen for me. So I'm curious regarding these titles. Let's do this in the chat. Okay. Open your chat boxes, friends. And I'm going to run through these really quickly. And you got to make a call in the chat box, right? And don't write anything fancy, just write the title, just so we don't have like 7 rounds of chat. So Jane Ann has already voted for, and she voted for The Codebreaker, and she left, had to leave for the call. She's on vacation in Florida. God bless her. So The Codebreaker.
Yep.
Is 1. The second one is Eternal.
What about the ones that were in the email, Joe?
We are passing on those, my friend. Unless you want to make an argument for one.
Oh, okay.
Okay. We talked about those.
No, it's okay. I just was wondering, I didn't recognize it.
Man on the Mountaintop.
Okay.
Was the 3rd one? Man on the Mountaintop. 4th was Bossy Pants, a lighter, but probably again a very good read and a fun audible, they're saying, because Tina Fey narrates it herself. When Life Gives You Pears, again, a comedy, but with a real story of diagnosis of brain tumor and managing a family through that. That's Life Gives You Pears. And the last one was The Pale-Faced Lie, the story about kids being kind of forced to commit crimes for their father, who is a Cherokee. All right. Cheryl, are you tallying these up?
Am I tallying up? I can tell you that The Codebreaker is getting the most votes for sure.
I haven't voted and I wanted that.
1,
what?
2,
I
3, 4,
I have not
5,
voted because I'm on both.
6 votes for The
I wanted
Codebreaker.
The Codebreaker.
7 votes for The
Okay.
Codebreaker. It
And
is
Cynthia wants to vote for that.
The Codebreaker.
And I have a suggestion, because it seems like the next one that got a lot of votes was Bossy Pants. Was it?
Yeah.
No, maybe I was just rethinking
No,
that.
There's
2 for that one.
A lot for Eternal.
2 Eternal.
Okay. Yeah, there's not enough.
the mountain.
Not
Why
a,
don't we just do the one,
not
Cheryl?
really a clear second.
There's not a clear
No.
second, but next week
Okay.
it'll figure itself out.
All right. All right. Well, let's keep these same books. Let's keep these same books up for, I'll send a list out in the email or something, and then maybe we'll choose one, another one from the email or something.
Or we might
And
be in a different
get some
mood.
suggestions for next week.
Or we might be in a different
Excuse me?
mood by that time.
Exactly.
Well,
The
that's
world
true.
will be different
Okay.
by then.
All right. Okay. Never mind. We're going with The Codebreaker. All right.
Okay.
For now.
Who was that?
All right.
Okay.
Thank you
Who wrote
guys.
that?
That was awesome.
Edie, how did you turn that way?
Love you.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all.